The story kicks off with a diligent young man named Noor who spends his days taking on odd jobs around town. Everyone respects him for his strong work ethic, and he earns just enough to get by. One day, while receiving payment for a job, Noor suddenly hears a girl screaming for help. He wastes no time and dashes into a nearby cave, where he finds her under attack by a vicious beast. We flash back 15 years earlier. A young Noor is seen preparing medicine for his ailing mother. Despite the weight on his shoulders, he heads out to gather the goats. Before he leaves, his mother warns him not to stray past a certain boulder. It's clear that her health is rapidly declining, and Noor offers to make her some tea, but she gently stops him. She apologizes for not being able to do more for him, and encourages Noor to live the life he truly desires. That evening, Noor prepares dinner as usual, but his world shatters when he discovers his mother has passed away. The next day, he lays her to rest and begins learning how to survive on his own. Life becomes a constant routine of hard work and responsibility, but Noor faces it all alone. One night, he comes across an old book that triggers a powerful memory, and his father used to read him that very story. It told of a brave adventurer who, alongside his companions, defeated a mighty dragon, learned magic from a wizard, and lifted a dark curse that plagued an ancient forest, and the group was honored by all. Known for standing against evil to protect those they cared about. Inspired by the tale and his mother's final words, Noor makes a bold decision. He's going to become an adventurer, saying farewell to his late parents, and he steps beyond the protective barrier surrounding his home for the first time. After days of travel, Noor is left speechless at the sight of the massive royal capital. The crowds, the buildings, the energy, it's unlike anything he's ever known. Among the crowd, a rugged adventurer catches his eye, only fueling his excitement. Noor eventually reaches the Adventurers Guild, a place recommended by the city guards. But as he steps forward, the clerk turns him away, saying it's no place for a kid. When Noor explains that he has no parents to return to, the clerk softens and he explains that before anyone can join the guild in the royal capital, they must first enroll in the royal training schools. If Noor truly wants to pursue this path, he'll need to develop real skills, magic, swordsmanship, and more. Fired up by the idea, Noor eagerly heads to the School of Heroes, ready to take the first step toward his dream. However, while his classmates begin unlocking their magical abilities, Noor struggles. Time passes, and his instructor eventually loses patience, telling Noor that continuing this path would only be a waste of time. The only ability Noor managed to pick up during his time at the School of Heroes was parrying, just enough to deflect or dodge an attack. His instructor, unimpressed, suggests that Noor consider a different path. Taking the advice to heart, Noor enrolls in a warrior training school. Warriors put their lives on the line to shield their comrades, which gives Noor a bit of hope. After all, that sounds pretty close to being an adventurer, but the training is brutal. Even after months of intense physical exercise, Noor sees only minimal improvement, and his instructor warns him that pushing beyond his limits could be fatal. Reluctantly, Noor moves on again, and this time to try hunter training. But he struggles with precision and delicate weaponry. He then gives thief training a shot, but once again, it's clear he doesn't have the right instincts, and as a last resort, he turns to magic. But unfortunately, his magical ability is next to nothing, and after months of effort, the only thing he can conjure is a tiny flicker of flame. And even the instructor named Gandalf is stunned, and it's rare to see someone with such little magical aptitude. Noor's final attempt is cleric training, but even then he can barely heal the smallest cuts, and after cycling through all the schools, each for 3 months, the Adventurers Guild clerk is shocked to hear that Noor has failed to master even a single practical skill. Regretfully, he tells Noor that he cannot be registered as an adventurer. Defeated, Noor returns home. He's come to accept that he's no prodigy, no chosen one, and still, that doesn't break his spirit. He resolves to push harder. Noor forges his own sword and remembers something his old sword instructor once told him, that if a person focuses on mastering one single skill, it could evolve into something new. Since parrying was the only thing he ever got the hang of, Noor decides to dedicate himself to it entirely. Morning, noon, and night, he trains relentlessly, and 1 year later, he can deflect 10 strikes in a single breath. He hasn't learned any flashy techniques, but his parrying has advanced significantly. 3 more years pass, and he's now able to parry 100 blades in one breath. Still, not a single new skill has emerged. Noor starts to think that becoming a true adventurer might be impossible. Even so, he doesn't stop and he trains harder than ever before, until one day his sword shatters from overuse. But something unexpected happens. A faint glow appears in his hand. Noor sees it as a sign and continues pushing forward. 10 years go by. Noor has never skipped a day of training. He can now parry 1,000 wooden swords in a single breath. Yet, despite his progress, he still hasn't unlocked any new powers, and still determined, he decides to make one final attempt at joining the Adventurers Guild. Back at the capital, he meets the same guild clerk who takes one look at his skill list and sees only the most basic of techniques. She suggests he return to the training schools, but Noor explains that he's already been through them all. She apologizes, informing him again that without useful abilities, he can't be registered. Noor isn't surprised. He expected this outcome. But just then, the old clerk from years ago appears. At first, he doesn't recognize Noor, but when he finally does, he's surprised and impressed that Noor continued training all this time. Noor, however, admits that his efforts haven't amounted to much. He's only managed to refine his parrying ability. The old man explains that adventurers are ranked from E to S, and to qualify even as an E rank, one must possess at least 2 useful skills. Noor's status is too low. His dreams seem crushed once again. But then the clerk shares something unexpected. There is a rank below EF rank. Noor is shocked. He might still have a chance after all. However, there are restrictions. F-rank adventurers aren't allowed to accept missions that involve combat or traveling outside the city. They're limited to minor, often overlooked tasks within the capital. It's a path so unrewarding that almost no one bothers to take it. To the clerk's surprise, Noor is thrilled to accept the F rank. Without hesitation, he registers, and the clerk hands him his official F rank adventurer license. For the guild, it's just paperwork, but for Noor, it's everything. He bows in gratitude. This is the moment he's dreamed of for years. Wasting no time, Noor gets to work. He starts taking on simple tasks around the city. His strength improves as he carries loads, and his speed increases, especially when chasing down a runaway cat. He uses a minor healing spell to treat the scratches left by the cat, and even puts his tiny flame to use by cooking his dinner. For the local children, he performs a little rock levitation trick, just to make them smile. It may not be the heroic life of fighting dragons or breaking curses, but Noor has finally become what he always wanted, an adventurer who helps people, and honestly, he feels asking for more might be too selfish. We then return to the present, where Noor had rushed into a dark cave. Inside, a massive beast is terrorizing a group of people. It's the first time Noor has seen a monster in real life, and is far more terrifying than anything he's read about. The guards try to protect a young girl, but their captain is quickly struck down. Noor rushes over only to realize it's too late. The captain is already dead. The other guards fight desperately, but Noor knows they don't stand a chance, and sure enough, in mere seconds, the monster annihilates them all. Now, it sets its sights on the girl. Thinking fast, Noor throws a rock to distract the creature. It works. The beast turns to him. Noor sprints to create distance, realizing just how fast this monster is. With no time to waste, he braces himself and uses his parry skill. The impact launches the monster backward, but the fight is far from over. The beast comes charging, and Noor continues to parry every blow, fully aware that if even one attack lands, he won't survive. His plan is to wait for an opening and counter, but then he remembers he has no offensive abilities. To make things worse, the girl still hasn't escaped. Noor quickly notices that the monster is fixated on her ring, whatever it is. It's drawing the creature toward her. The monster lunges, but Noor speeds in using his feather step technique and manages to deflect the attack. His sword, however, shatters on impact. Still, Noor stands his ground. He may never become the kind of adventurer who slays dragons or leads heroic quests, but he's determined to protect this girl. He remembers his father's words. Adventurers raise their swords to strike down evil for the sake of the weak. With that, he steadies himself. The beast charges again, and this time Noor delivers a flawless parry, so precise, so powerful that it decapitates the monster in a single move. Panting, Noor realizes the truth. If the monster had been even slightly stronger, he wouldn't have survived. He now understands how far he is from the heroes of legend. At his current level, traveling the world or taking on grand adventures is nothing but a fantasy. The girl, still shaken, thanks him for saving her life and asks for his name. Noor simply smiles and says, "I'm nobody important," before walking away. That night, the full weight of the encounter hits him. The monster he faced wasn't even a demon, yet it pushed him to his limits. His body trembles as he recalls the fight, but instead of giving in to fear, he clenches his fists and renews his resolve. If he wants to stand a chance out there, he has to train harder, much, much harder. Back in the cave, they revisit the aftermath of Noor's intense battle with the beast. A knight kneels before Princess Lin, apologizing for failing to protect her. But Lin gently assures her that it's all right. After all, she was the one who insisted on taking the trial alone. This was her choice, and she apologizes for making the knight named Enos worry. News of the incident quickly reaches Lin's older brother Rain. Troubled by what he hears, he questions how a minotaur, a demon native to the abyss, the deepest part of the dungeon, could have appeared in the city. Someone must have summoned it to the surface. A man named Dargan, shrouded in the night, agrees. He reveals that the origin of the summoning is likely linked to a strange ring found on the corpse of a merchant at the scene. An old mage examined the ring and discovered that it contained an extraordinarily rare gemstone, something not even found in the markets. The crest engraved on it confirmed its origin, the magic empire of Darius, isn't the first time the kingdom has had trouble with Darius, but this time they crossed a line. Not only was a monster summoned, but Princess Lin had been sealed within a barrier during the attack. It's clear now that Darius wasn't just trying to eliminate her. They're targeting the kingdom's most prized possession, the relics hidden deep within the Dungeon of the Lost. Changing the subject, Rain shifts his focus to the mysterious stranger who saved Lin. Reports claim that a lone man, wielding only a broadsword, took down the Minotaur in seconds. Knights tried to follow him afterward, but he vanished right before their eyes, like a phantom. It all sounds impossible, and Rain can't help but wonder, who was that man? Meanwhile, back at the Adventurers Guild, the old clerk is stunned to see Nor walk through the doors alive. Word had spread that a powerful demon had appeared near the dungeon's entrance, a creature unlike anything they'd ever seen. After that, Nor had seemingly vanished without a trace. Nor recalls that he had been trying to shake off a suspicious group that had been tailing him, but rather than explain everything, he casually tells the clerk that he was just tired and decided to go home. The clerk tells him he's incredibly lucky. If he had come face to face with that demon, he wouldn't have stood a chance. Even the clerk himself, a former A-rank adventurer, admits he would have been killed. But Nor simply shrugs. Based on the way the clerk talks, Nor assumes he's referring to a completely different monster, because the one Nor fought was, in his words, just a giant cow-looking thing, not some terrifying demon. The clerk brings up a recent event, a mysterious man who defeated a powerful demon with a single strike. Nor is blown away. He's amazed that people like that actually exist. As the clerk hands Nor his payment for the day's work, he can't help but ask why Nor doesn't aim for more lucrative jobs. Nor looks completely confused. The clerk sighs and once again explains that there's a way for Nor to earn 30% more from his tasks by registering independently without giving the guild a cut. But before they can go any further, they're interrupted. To the clerk's shock, Princess Lin suddenly walks in. Lin smiles and says she found Nor by using her long-distance detection skill. She apologizes for the intrusion, but explains that she had to see him in person. Nor, surprised, assumes she has thief-type abilities, but Lin corrects him. She specializes in magic and has knowledge of all 6 skill branches. Everyone in the guild is now watching them closely, so Lin suggests they talk outside where it's more private. The clerk grows nervous, unsure what kind of situation Nor has gotten himself into. Lin assures them both that outside will be better, and with her soundproofing and concealment magic, no one will be able to eavesdrop on their conversation. Nor hesitates, wondering if this is a good idea, but the clerk insists they go, mostly so the awkward attention dies down. As they step outside, Nor overhears some people talking about the mystery man who saved the princess. But now there's doubt. Some wonder if he was even real. Nor, still oblivious, quietly wonders who they're all looking for. Lin quickly dismisses the concern, saying no one can track them thanks to her magic. She tells Nor that the reason she sought him out is simple. She wants to thank him for saving her life. In fact, she says, he didn't just save her. He saved countless others in the kingdom that day. Nor is skeptical, and from his perspective, Lin seems strong enough to handle the situation. He feels like all he did was get in the way. But Lin insists that if it hadn't been for him, the outcome could have been far worse, and Nor finally accepts her gratitude. Lin, however, wants to do more. She insists on rewarding him in a way that reflects the depth of her thanks. But Nor, ever humble, says it's not necessary. Even when Lin reveals that her father, the king himself, wishes to meet him, Nor declines, saying that it's just too much. Lin reminds him that she's royalty and someone of her status must properly repay a debt of life. But Nor refuses every offer. Frustrated, Lin suddenly bursts into tears. She plants herself on the ground and declares that she won't move an inch until Nor accepts something in return. Her stubbornness triggers something in Nor, a memory of his own determination back when he trained at the schools. He smiles and says, fine, he'll meet her father if that's what it takes. But to his surprise, Lin suddenly grows cautious and nervous at the mention of that meeting. Lin explains that she doesn't want anyone spotting them, so she activates a combination of concealment, detection blocking, and several other skills to keep them completely hidden. Nor is amazed, not just by her magic, but by the sheer size of her home. It's massive. But Lin casually tells him that estates like this are normal for her family. Nor finally introduces himself, realizing that Lin hasn't actually given her full name yet. She smiles and formally introduces herself as Lindbergh Clays, though she goes by Lin when adventuring. Nor is stunned. The name, the estate, everything points to her being some kind of high-ranking aristocrat. Lin asks Enos where her father is. Enos replies that he's currently speaking with Rain. Lin tells her that Nor is their special guest, the man who risked his life to save her, and Enos is shocked, but wastes no time escorting them to the king. Nor, meanwhile, is totally lost in all this formality. He still assumes Enos might be the family maid, though, based on her armor and attitude, he wonders how anyone could do chores in that outfit. She's serious, stoic, and clearly sizing him up. As they walk through the estate, a stern man suddenly stops them, demanding to know who Nor is. The tension spikes immediately. Nor senses that this house is far more dangerous than he expected. The man is named Gilbert, and Enus tells him that Nor is a guest of honor. Gilbert puts two and two together. This is the guy everyone's been talking about. But he doesn't seem impressed, and doesn't look like much, he mutters. Enus is still wary of Nor, quietly instructs Gilbert to accompany them, just in case. The more eyes on Nor, the better. Gilbert nods at now on full alert. Elsewhere in the estate, the king is in a heated discussion. He's furious that the Empire of Daris is openly ignoring the peace treaty. They demanded full rights to the dungeon and in return offered their military assistance, a thinly veiled power grab that would cripple the kingdom. The king refused, knowing it would destroy his nation. Daris responded with a threat. You'll regret this. Rain warns that Daris may not be the only threat they face, and the king grimly agrees. The storm is coming, and just then Lynn enters the room with Nor and the others. Everyone immediately bows in the presence of the king, except Nor, who casually walks right up beside Lynn, completely unaware of the royal etiquette. Rain's eyes widen when he sees what Lynn is wearing, the hermit's cloak. He's furious. That cloak is only used when sneaking out, which means she left the palace, and Lynn admits it. She had to go find the man who saved her life, and her father. The king is grateful. He tells Nor how glad he is that he came. Nor awkwardly explains that he's not a noble, so he doesn't really know how to act in front of royalty, but the king actually finds that refreshing, and it makes Nor easier to speak to. He then formally thanks him for saving his daughter's life. Nor accepts the words with a polite nod. That's all the gratitude he needs, and he's relieved. As far as he's concerned, this whole royal affair is finally over. He's ready to head home. But the king stops him. He insists on rewarding Nor properly. He offers him money, land, anything he wants. Nor politely refuses. He doesn't need any of that. The king tries again, this time offering something rarer, the treasures recovered from their nation's most ancient and sacred place, the Dungeon of the Lost. These artifacts are stored in the royal treasury, and he offers Nor half of them. Rain is stunned. You're being way too generous, he tells his father. Still, Nor declines once more. He doesn't want gold, land, or treasure. The kind words they've already given him are more than enough. The king is left speechless. He's never met a man who could turn down wealth, power, and prestige so easily. And now, he isn't sure what he can offer someone like Nor. But all Nor wants to do is leave. Seeing this, Lynn's father makes one final, extreme offer. He gestures to the sword resting behind his throne and tells Nor to take it. Rain is visibly confused. What is his father thinking? But the king calmly explains that the sword is nothing more than a decoration now. It's been sitting unused for years. Giving it to Nor, someone who might actually wield it, would be far more meaningful. Besides, no one will notice if he replaces it with a replica. The room goes silent. No one can believe what they're witnessing. Nor steps forward and lifts the sword, only to be stunned by its incredible weight. He can feel the value just by holding it. The craftsmanship, the energy, it's clearly priceless. Shaken, he tells the king he can't accept something this valuable. But Lynn's father brushes it off. He says it's just a weapon he picked up once upon a time. He only used it because it felt right in his hands. To him, it's nothing special. Reassured, Nor hesitantly accepts the gift. The king urges him to give it a swing. Nor channels his enhanced strength and delivers a powerful one-handed strike that leaves everyone stunned. The force of it echoes through the hall. Impressed, the king chuckles and asks Nor for a favor. Could he help toughen up his daughter? The world's growing more dangerous and he worries for her safety. But Nor respectfully declines. He doesn't think there's anything he could teach someone like Lynn. More importantly, he believes that parents shouldn't interfere too much. Lynn should make her own decisions. Surprisingly, the king agrees. He seems to enjoy Nor's honest perspective, and Nor begins to notice that this man, despite being royalty, laughs a lot and treats people with sincerity. With that, Nor decides it's time to go. The king thanks him once more, and Nor steps out of the palace. As he walks away, he can't stop thinking about the sword he's now carrying. It feels like he was just handed something far too valuable. Then a thought hits him. The sword's shape, its balance, it looks just like the one he uses to scrape out a drain for an old lady back home. Would this sword make that job easier, he wonders? Out of nowhere, Enus appears. Nor immediately assumes he's in trouble, but to his shock, Enus kneels before him. She solemnly apologizes for how she treated him earlier, especially considering he saved Lynn's life. Nor accepts the apology, still unsure what to make of all this. Enus then explains that her priority is, and always has been, the safety of the Clay family. That comes before everything else. Nor finally realizes she's not a maid. Enus tells him her real title, the Divine Shield. She serves as the vice captain of the Clay family warrior corps. Even at a young age, she was appointed as Lynn's personal protector, sworn to guard her with her life. And since Nor saved Lynn, Enus says, it's the same as if he had saved her life too. Nor shrugs it off. To him, it wasn't that big of a deal. Despite everything, Enus solemnly vows to support Nor however she can from now on. Noor, still not used to all this formality, thinks everyone here tends to go a little over the top, but he decides to accept her sentiment with a quiet nod. But suddenly, Inus turns stern, and she reminds him that while Lin may have allowed it, Noor's casual attitude and informal speech toward the king were completely unacceptable. From this point on, she insists, he must show proper respect in royal presence. It can't happen again. Noor quickly apologizes and offers a more formal introduction. "My name is Noor," he says sincerely. For some reason, Inus looks surprised when she hears his name. She brushes it off quickly, claiming it's nothing, but the pause lingers just long enough to make Noor wonder. Before he can think too much about it, Gilbert steps forward and blocks his path. Noor sighs. He was hoping to finally head home, but Gilbert isn't letting him off that easily. He demands a proper duel. "I want to see what you're capable of," he says. Noor, already exhausted from everything that's happened, can only groan internally, and he just wants to go home. Noor is stunned when Gilbert insists on a mock battle. He hasn't sparred with anyone since his training days, 14 years ago. He has no idea what to expect. Gilbert, calm and confident, explains that he's actually quite well known for his combat prowess. He invites Noor to pick any weapon he likes. Realizing this is a rare opportunity, a real duel with someone far more skilled, Noor chooses a sword and declares himself ready. He doesn't expect to stand a chance against someone like Gilbert, but he sees it as the perfect chance to learn and grow. Meanwhile, the soldiers watching from the sidelines shake their heads in pity. They think Noor's completely out of his depth. "Rest in peace," they mutter, bracing for a quick and brutal end, and the battle begins. Gilbert makes the first move, but Noor effortlessly dodges. Noor is impressed by Gilbert's precise control and polished form. It's obvious Gilbert has spent years perfecting his craft. But there's something odd. Noor can't understand why Gilbert feels so slow. He assumes Gilbert is going easy on him. Probably doesn't think I'm worth going all out for, he thinks. Noor pauses the fight and says so directly, telling Gilbert not to hold back. Gilbert is caught off guard. He hadn't realized it, but Noor's right. Subconsciously, he had been holding back. After all, Noor just seemed like an ordinary guy. Gilbert apologizes and immediately steps up the intensity. This time, Noor notices a big difference. Gilbert is faster now, sharper. Yet Noor also notices something else. After every attack, Gilbert leaves himself completely open. Noor doesn't think twice about it. He assumes it's a trap, a tactic to lure him in. Gilbert, growing frustrated, still can't land a hit. Noor believes Gilbert's just toying with him. In truth, Gilbert is giving it his all, but Noor can't tell the difference. Wanting to prove his strength, Gilbert attempts a new technique, an attack that shifts mid-swing. But Noor sidesteps it with ease. That wasn't even close, he thinks. He turns to Gilbert and encourages him to go even faster. But then, for the first time, Noor pauses to consider something. Wait, what if this really is his full power? He remembers all those years of isolated training, all those days spent perfecting a single skill, and for the first time, Noor starts to believe, maybe I've actually gotten stronger. But before he can finish the thought, Gilbert unleashes a devastating attack, his signature move, the Drawgrave. Dust fills the air as the ground quakes from the force of the blow. When it clears, Noor is gone. And from behind, Noor's calm voice cuts through the silence. "I win." Gilbert is horrified. Noor casually walks away, leaving stunned silence behind him. The watching troops can't believe what they just saw. No one has ever dodged Drawgrave before. They try to rationalize it, saying the wide-bladed practice spear Gilbert used probably created a wind shock that blew Noor away. If Gilbert had used a real battle spear, they claim, Noor would have been decapitated on the spot. Everyone agrees Gilbert is a once-in-a-generation talent. But Gilbert doesn't feel that way. He thinks back on his past, how natural it felt the first time he picked up a spear. The more he trained, the stronger he got. His victories piled up as he traveled from village to village, defeating every local champion, searching for someone who could actually beat him. He had already bested every fighter in the royal capital. That's why, when he heard about Noor from some unknown village, he had hoped, maybe, just maybe, this guy would be the real deal. As tensions rose in the nation, Gilbert was advised to return to the capital where powerful factions were gathering. There, he resumed hunting demons and eventually heard that a formidable fighter had joined the corps. He challenged them and, as always, defeated them easily. But instead of satisfaction, Gilbert felt more frustrated. Surrounded by weak opponents, he was growing tired and bored. One day, his instructor informed him that he had finally earned the same elite title, but Gilbert barely reacted. He didn't care, and his instructor then asked what he thought of Inus. Gilbert admitted she was strong in her own way, though he was confident he would beat her in a mock battle. Gilbert could also sense that his instructor had grown bored too, forced to train recruits whose power didn't even match one of his fingers. But the instructor remained hopeful that someday someone would come who could surpass even them, and Gilbert just hoped that day would come soon. Now, after facing Noor, he reflects. This was the man who defeated a Minotaur alone. Gilbert couldn't understand it. Noor had shown no manners, acted unimpressed by riches, and looked nothing like a warrior. But their duel proved different. When Noor told him to stop holding back, Gilbert went all out, using his most powerful move, Draw Grave, a technique that usually ended battles instantly. But Noor disappeared before the attack landed. Gilbert didn't even know what happened. For the first time in a fair fight, Gilbert had been thoroughly defeated. Worse, Noor had surrendered as if trying not to embarrass him, and then he casually said he hoped they would meet again. That alone stung more than the defeat. After Noor left, Gilbert noticed the ground beneath them had deep cracks, ones he hadn't even realized Noor had caused. Still, Noor had evaded his ultimate attack, and that meant only one thing to Gilbert. Things were finally getting exciting. Meanwhile, Noor was having his own realizations. He admitted to himself that he had been foolish to think he was getting stronger. Even with strength enhancement and feather step, he believed he only dodged Gilbert's move because Gilbert had held back slightly. But instead of being discouraged, Noor was thankful. Gilbert had shown him just how far he still had to go. Determined once more, he returned to doing low-rank tasks. He was amazed by how effective his new sword was at cleaning drains. It could even remove the toughest grime at the bottom. He figured he could drop his soil hauling work for a while and focus on this instead. Noor didn't care about using the sword for flashy battles. All he wanted was to be useful to people. He brainstormed ways to make more use of the sword, but every idea had problems, mostly because his abilities were still weak. The best he could do was make a small flame appear on his fingertip. After all the schools he'd trained in, that was still the extent of his magical skill. Just then, Lin appeared. Noor remembered he was supposed to be formal around royalty, but Lin told him not to bother. She didn't like it. She had come with a special request. Lin declares that she wants Noor to accept her as his page. Noor has no idea what that even means, so she explains. A page is someone who assists another with daily needs, while learning from them, absorbing knowledge and technique. Similar to being an apprentice. But in her case, just being around Noor would be enough. Noor immediately refuses. Lin insists she can be of use. She's achieved the highest marks ever recorded in all 6 training schools and believes she would make an excellent page. But Noor still rejects her offer, saying there's simply nothing for him to teach her. He explains that he's fine on his own and doesn't need help. Lin tries to persuade him by offering payment from her family, but he declines that too. She offers to be his assistant instead, but he says he has no need for one. Wanting to prove herself, Lin unleashes a grand display of magic, showing off high-level abilities from multiple disciplines. She demonstrates Mistblade, slicing a massive tree clean in half with a single Thief-class strike. Then she follows up with Divine Slash, a powerful Sacred-class swordsman technique. Noor watches quietly as she shows what she's capable of, but when he rejects her once again, Lin is visibly disappointed. Noor wonders if she's mistaking him for someone worth learning from. He doesn't see himself as a teacher, especially not to someone as overwhelmingly skilled as Lin. All she's done is remind him how much more capable she is than he ever will be, yet Lin remains determined. So Noor thinks there's only one way to make her understand. He'll show her the full extent of his skills. After Lin's incredible display, Noor responds by showing her the only magical ability he's ever truly mastered. A slightly larger version of the beginner's spell, Tiny Flame. It's small and unimpressive at first glance. Afterwards, as she walks home, Lin reflects on an old story told at every training school. It was a tale instructors often shared with students, a fairy tale really, about a boy with no talent, a boy who enrolled in all 6 Royal Capital training schools and completed the full term in each. Most warriors gave up after 3 days, yet this boy, a mere child, endured every 3-month course. For years, Lin assumed it was just a legend. Then one day, Instructor Oaken, the master of magic, showed her something interesting. His own Tiny Flame spell. He explained that while it had no practical use, he'd spent 200 years trying to grow it, and had only managed to enlarge it slightly, just for fun. Lin herself had tried to replicate that growth countless times, but she couldn't make her flame grow at all. It was something that clearly took extraordinary devotion and time. That's why when she saw Noor's tiny flame, she was stunned. His version of the spell wasn't just larger, it was multiple times the size of Oaken's and completely stable. Noor had been ashamed of it, apologizing as if it were nothing. He said the other 5 skills he possessed were all the same: basic, low tier, unimpressive. But what Noor didn't understand was that each of those skills, including Tiny Flame, had been pushed far beyond normal human limits. All 6 were extraordinary. Lin now felt ashamed for trying to impress him. Noor had quietly fought off a demon with only a basic sword technique. He never bragged, never postured, and never demanded recognition. Instead, he just kept working hard, helping others in silence. Lin realized something important. Noor is strong, not just in skill, but in heart and will. He never yields. And that is the kind of strength she needs if she's to stand beside her brother and lead the nation. That's why she's so determined to learn not just techniques, but how Noor became the kind of person he is. Later that night, Lin finds Noor again. She thinks about everything she's learned, and she silently makes a vow. Wherever Noor goes, she will follow, and she won't stop until he recognizes her as his page. Because she now understands the true strength, the kind her royal family has been searching for, isn't just in magic or swordplay. Back at the castle, Rain is furious. His father had given away the Black Blade, one of the kingdom's most valuable relics, to someone with unknown lineage. The sword had been discovered deep within the Dungeon of the Lost during one of the most dangerous quests ever undertaken. It was crafted from a material that no one could identify, something harder than anything known to man. No technique, no weapon, no spell could leave even a scratch on it. Because of this, it came to be known as the Unbreakable Blade. Yet when they found it, the sword was already damaged and worn. That fact alone had terrified scholars and warriors alike. What kind of force could possibly have left a mark on a blade that shouldn't even be breakable? Its value was beyond comprehension, and Rain couldn't wrap his head around why his father had just handed it to Noor without hesitation. Eventually, Rain reevaluates the situation. There's a growing unease hanging over the kingdom, and he realizes that perhaps his father is preparing for something. Maybe, just maybe, giving Noor the sword wasn't a careless gift. It was a calculated move. After all, Noor is the man who defeated a Minotaur alone and saved Lin's life. It's entirely possible that his father sees Noor as a hidden weapon, something or someone critical to facing the threats that may soon come. Meanwhile, Noor walks alongside Lin, questioning whether it's really okay for a princess to be wandering around like this. But Lin reminds him that she's an adventurer first. She casually calls him her instructor again, despite Noor's efforts to correct her. No matter what he says, she keeps following him, undeterred. Noor decides to take on a job at the Adventurers Guild, hoping she'll see how plain and unremarkable his life really is. Maybe then she'll stop thinking of him as someone worth learning from. At the guild, the clerk is visibly confused when he sees Noor arrive with the princess, but Lin quickly corrects him. Right now, she's not a princess, she's just Lin the adventurer. The clerk wisely chooses not to ask further questions. Noor tells him they're looking for a job that requires 2 people. Because Lin holds a silver rank license, forming a party with her means they can accept a goblin hunting quest just outside the capital. Noor is stunned. Goblins are the monsters that adventurers use to test their skills. He's amazed that he's finally allowed to take a job outside the capital walls, but at the same time, he feels guilty. He's been trying to shake Lin off from the beginning, yet now he's benefiting from her rank. He wonders if she's really okay with this, but Lin cheerfully tells him it would be an honor to form a party with him. Feeling a mix of shame and excitement, Noor pushes those thoughts aside because one of his dreams is finally about to come true. He's about to take on a real adventurer's job. He rushes off to start, only to be called back because the clerk still hasn't given him the mission details. The clerk explains that while goblin hunting is considered a low-ranked job, that doesn't make it safe. Their task will take place in the Forest of the Beasts, and they'll need to return with a goblin's ear as proof of success. Without it, they won't get paid. However, reports suggest that goblin numbers have dropped significantly, so it's possible they won't find any. If that happens, the clerk tells them to simply gather herbs and bring those back instead. Noor and Lin leave the capital together, encouraging each other to do their best. As they walk through the forest, Noor asks Lin to tell him more about goblins. She explains that goblins survive by hunting small animals and eating wild fruits. But recently, they've begun attacking humans for food. If their population keeps growing, they'll eventually face food shortages and may start invading human villages. That's why adventurers take on goblin extermination missions, to keep their numbers under control. However, Lin adds that goblins play an important role in the ecosystem, and if they're hunted into extinction, it would also cause problems for the forest. Her deep understanding of the topic only reinforces Noor's belief that he has nothing to teach her. She's already ahead of him in every way. Lin keeps scanning the area using her detection abilities, but they haven't seen a single goblin. Normally, they would have encountered at least one by now. Based on this, she concludes that the rumors are true. The goblin population really is declining. Just then, Lin senses a monster nearby, and they move toward the source, but the deeper they go, the darker the forest becomes. The towering trees above block out the sunlight completely, creating a shadowy, unsettling atmosphere. But Lin explains that goblins tend to prefer places like this. Suddenly, she halts, and the presence she was tracking just vanished. Noor casually suggests the monster might have died of old age, but they're both stunned when they find the mutilated body of a goblin lying ahead. Lin wastes no time and casts Reveal Magic. The spell uncovers a massive creature feasting on the goblin's remains. Noor is shocked to learn that the monster is a goblin too. An enormous one. He always thought goblins were supposed to be the weakest monsters. The giant still clearly resembles a goblin, but its massive frame and savage aura suggest otherwise. It even uproots nearby trees and swings them around like clubs. Noor, completely clueless, assumes that this must just be what goblins really look like in person, different from how people described them. He also figures that most adventurers are probably strong enough to handle them with ease. But Lin is visibly terrified, and Noor doesn't blame her. She's never been in real combat before, and still he assures her they'll be fine. After all, they're just fighting a goblin. In truth, Nor is terrified, but he knows he can't give in to fear if they're going to survive. Lynn, however, realizes what they're truly facing. This isn't a regular goblin, it's the Goblin Emperor, an extreme threat-level monster created through banned genetic manipulation. What makes it especially terrifying is its ability to devour other goblins and absorb their strength, becoming more powerful with each one it consumes. Lynn thinks back to how Nor had casually said they were just fighting a goblin. His calmness amazed her. Now, even she starts to believe he must have come here on purpose. Maybe this job wasn't random. Maybe Nor knew the danger and took the mission to eliminate a hidden threat. That idea gives her confidence. As the Goblin Emperor strikes first, Nor leaps into action. He uses his parry skill with expert timing to deflect the attack, though the sheer force of the blow pushes him back. Nor realizes the goblin is trying to corner him, but he refuses to be trapped. He maneuvers skillfully and throws the goblin off balance, calling out for Lynn to follow up with a magic attack. She fires, but the goblin is too quick. It dodges effortlessly. Then the creature retaliates by launching entire trees at them. Nor steps in front of Lynn and uses parry again, deflecting the massive trunks as best he can. Lynn knows she has to act quickly before things spiral further out of control. Then she notices something terrifying. The Goblin Emperor's wounds are completely healed. That shouldn't be possible. Even one of this level shouldn't recover that fast. That's when she sees it. A glowing mana crystal embedded in the goblin's forehead. It must be the source of its regeneration. She shouts to Nor that if he can knock the crystal off, they might have a chance at defeating it. Before they can act, the goblin unleashes a barrage, dozens of trees hurled in one coordinated attack. Nor is stunned. He realizes that the Goblin Emperor has been observing him the entire time, calculating how many attacks he can parry at once. Nor knows he won't be able to deflect them all. Just when things look grim, Lynn steps in and uses her magic to redirect the incoming trees, buying them precious time. But the Goblin Emperor heals again, and now Lynn is certain. The mana crystal is replenishing its energy every time it takes damage. They both realize the truth. At this rate, they're just wasting stamina and magic trying to keep up. If they don't destroy that crystal, they'll lose. That's when Nor comes up with an idea. He tells Lynn to use her Wind Blast spell on him. Lynn is horrified. That kind of spell has the power to destroy castle walls. If she hits him with it, there's no way he'll survive no matter how strong he is. Nor quickly explains that Lynn won't be hitting him directly. Instead, he wants her to aim her Wind Blast at the sword strapped to his back. The idea is to use the explosive force to propel himself forward, because the only way they'll beat the Goblin Emperor is by moving faster than it can react. There's no time to argue as the monster prepares another assault, so Lynn reluctantly agrees. Her Wind Blast is immensely powerful. The moment it strikes Nor's sword, the sheer force launches him across the battlefield like a missile. He nearly blacks out from the impact, but manages to stay conscious. Gritting his teeth, he enhances his body mid-flight. The boosted momentum and reinforced strength allow him to smash straight through the goblin's defenses. He drives his blade forward and knocks the mana crystal clean off the monster's forehead. The Goblin Emperor immediately goes berserk, thrashing in pain and fury. Lynn retrieves the fallen crystal. Nor, still catching his breath, tells her to finish it off. But he also asks her to do it quickly, without causing unnecessary pain. Lynn nods, but seemingly ignores that last part. She unleashes a powerful fire spell that engulfs the creature, and its agonized screams echo through the forest as it burns. When it's finally over, Nor quietly apologizes to the monster. It didn't deserve to suffer like that, and he realizes that, despite what he said earlier, he isn't emotionally ready for this kind of violence. He decides then and there that he won't slay another goblin, not until he's stronger, more prepared, and more in control of himself. He'll only move forward after he's trained harder and truly earned the right to take on greater threats. Sometime later, word reaches Rain. He learns that a Goblin Emperor was spotted and defeated. These creatures are several times more powerful than Goblin Kings, and this one even had a mana crystal embedded in its forehead. Rain suspects the crystal came from a demon's heart. The implications are serious. He begins to wonder who could have created something like that and what their goal might be. When he's told that Nor and Lynn were the ones who defeated it and survived with barely a scratch, he's left speechless. Incidents like this are becoming more frequent, so the Adventurers Guild launches an investigation to find out what's really going on. Back at the guild, the clerk is in disbelief. That scrawny little kid from years ago had just turned into a goblin-slaying warrior. Nor remains humble, giving much of the credit to Lynn. Still, he decides that this moment is worth celebrating. It might not seem like much to others, but for Nor, this was his first real hunt, and that means something. When they tell the clerk about the Mana Stone, it raises questions. The crystal was so advanced that the clerk wonders whether what they fought was even a goblin at all, and Nor insists that it was. or at least close enough, and Lin, still calling him her instructor, just agrees with whatever he says. Finally, the clerk asks for the goblin's ear so he can process the reward, and Nor looks over at Lin, grim-faced. They had completely burned the Goblin Emperor to ash, and there's nothing left to prove they ever fought it. At the castle, Rain makes a grim discovery while reviewing several confidential documents. He realizes that an enemy has already infiltrated deep into their territory. Alarmed, he immediately sends orders for troops to be dispatched to key regions across the kingdom. He even summons all 6 of the country's legendary heroes. Rain is furious with himself for not seeing the signs sooner. He curses the magical empire for their recklessness and greed. It's clear now, they're after the dungeon's vast resources, and they're willing to sacrifice innocent lives to get them. Rage boils inside him as he accepts the truth. The magical empire is coming to destroy everything. Meanwhile, back in town, we learn that the guildmaster did Nor a personal favor. Even though Nor didn't bring back the goblin's ear as proof, the guildmaster still compensated him, acknowledging the importance of Nor's first official hunt. Later that day, Nor and Lin finish a small celebration meal together. As they prepare to part ways, Lin wonders aloud if it's really okay for her to leave. Nor assures her it is, and thanks her again for all her help during the battle. Just then, Rain appears with an urgent request. He apologizes for the sudden timing, but asks Nor to escort Lin to the mountains the next morning. He even offers transportation for the journey. Though Rain doesn't reveal any details, Nor can sense the seriousness behind the request and agrees without hesitation. The next morning, Nor reflects on why he truly accepted the mission. Deep down, it wasn't just about helping Lin or the promise of payment. He simply wanted to ride in a carriage. Nor has never traveled beyond the capital before, so even this simple journey holds a special meaning for him. In fact, he's thrilled at the thought that one day he might get to travel to other countries too. As the carriage rolls through the landscape, Nor notices that Lin seems a bit on edge. He encourages her to relax and enjoy the view with him. Quietly, he thinks about his own dream. Just being a normal adventurer, traveling the world, taking jobs, and experiencing life freely. Lin apologizes for making him go out of his way for her, but Nor dismisses it. He reminds her that he owes her for helping him fight the Goblin Emperor. Looking back, we see that Rain's instructions were clear. They were to head toward the mountains and wait. If nothing strange happens, they will continue to a place called Mithra. Lin quietly hopes nothing will happen at all. Enos tries to comfort her, reminding her that she's here to protect her, but what Lin doesn't know is that Enos has secret orders directly from Rain. Rain warned Enos that the royal capital would likely fall into chaos soon. If she receives confirmation that the capital has been destroyed, she must escort both Nor and Lin to Mithra immediately. Enos didn't want to leave the capital in such a critical time, but she has no choice. Her orders are clear, and her duty is now tied to protecting Lin and Nor, whatever happens next. Rain reminded Enos of her most important duty, to protect Lin above all else. Meanwhile, Lin apologizes to Nor for dragging him into such a complicated situation, but Nor still treats it like a simple road trip. He can tell Lin is worried about something though. She quietly tells him that protecting him is now also part of her responsibility. She tries to ease his mind, but Nor, as laid back as ever, says there's no need. He can take care of himself, and if things get dangerous, he's confident he can run away fast enough. He's surprised though when Enya suddenly mentions her shield. Nor didn't even notice she had one, and Enyas reveals that it's actually a shield of light, completely invisible but incredibly strong. Neither weapons nor magic can penetrate it. She instructs Nor to hide behind it if anything happens, and Nor is amazed by the idea, and then starts thinking about the guy he fought at the castle, though he can't remember his name. He just calls him Armadillo. According to what Lin told him, Armadillo was so skilled that he once brought down a dragon by himself. Nor realizes that if Enos is just as strong as that guy, then they must be on a completely different level compared to him. He compliments her strength, which prompts Enos to open up a bit about her past. She explains that she grew up in an orphanage, and it was there she first discovered the strange, mysterious power within her. She didn't understand it back then, until one day, a little girl touched her by accident and got badly hurt. Afraid and confused, Enos eventually showed her power to the country heroes. And it was then confirmed that her abilities were a divine gift, historically rare and immensely powerful. Her power could either become a blade capable of cutting down entire armies, or a shield that could protect against anything. In the wrong hands, it could destroy a nation. One of the 6 heroes, a man named Dan, took her in and helped her learn how to control her power. Over time, she was trained by all 6 heroes, each teaching her how to wield her abilities. But even with their guidance, Enos could never completely shake her fear of hurting others. That fear drove her to isolate herself. It didn't last forever though, and the reason for that had something to do with why she had been so shocked to hear Nor's name earlier. She remembers one day during her training when Dan received urgent news of another monster attack. Things were escalating quickly, and under his breath, Dan muttered something, "If only Nor were still around." Enos heard it. When she asked who Noor was, Dan brushed it off and told her to forget it. But she didn't forget. This mysterious Noor was clearly someone her adoptive father deeply respected. She became envious of that unknown person, and now, after meeting Noor in person, that envy has only grown stronger. Despite her feelings, Enos refuses to let emotions cloud her judgment. Her focus remains the same: protect Lynn at all costs. Just then, the group notices an odd path carved through the field. Lynn activates her uncovering spell, and it reveals the presence of a hidden monster. Back at the royal capital, the king receives confirmation. The attack has begun. Reports flood in. There aren't enough soldiers to defend against all the monsters that have appeared. Chaos erupts throughout the capital. Rain immediately takes charge. He devises a strategy to both fight off the monsters and evacuate the civilians. The king curses the Empire of Darius for following through on their threat and fears this is only the beginning. Rain informs him that all 6 national heroes have already been dispatched across the capital to hold the front lines. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, we see a group of people under attack by massive goblins, until one of the heroes arrives just in time to help. One by one, the other heroes begin to appear, joining the battle, and the situation grows more dangerous by the minute, but Rain finds some comfort in knowing that at least Lynn is safe for now. But back in the mountains, the situation is shifting. A boy stands alongside a black dragon, his eyes filled with determination, his target clear. Lynn manages to shatter the dragon's protective barrier, and the dragon in response shoves the boy away, and Enos catches sight of the black dragon and instantly recognizes it. She's stunned. Why would such a ferocious beast be here? Noor doesn't wait for explanations, and the moment he senses danger, he springs into action. Enos tries to stop him, but it's too late. Noor has already rushed in to confront the dragon. Without hesitation, he fights off the beast to protect the child nearby. But Enos quickly points out something troubling. That same child was already with the dragon before they even arrived. A memory flashes back to a conversation Rain once had with Lynn, explaining the dark truth about demon folk. They are a type of demi-human with the unique ability to mentally bond with monsters. They're not quite human, they're something closer to monsters themselves. In the past, these demi-humans used their influence to manipulate powerful creatures and nearly brought ruin to the city of Mithra. Because of this, they were hunted down by humans and believed to be extinct. But clearly some of their descendants have survived. Rain had warned Lynn, if she ever saw one, she should run. These beings hold a deep hatred for humanity. Now Enos confirms her suspicion. The boy is manipulating the dragon. It's likely he intended to bring the beast to the royal capital, possibly as part of a larger attack. But when Lynn shattered the dragon's magical barrier, the boy seems to have lost control of it. What shocks Enos the most is that Noor didn't hesitate. He jumped in to help without even understanding the situation. She's angry, calling his actions reckless, and wonders what kind of person he thinks he is. Lynn says they should assist him, but Enos unexpectedly refuses. Her duty is to protect Lynn, not Noor. Noor continues to fight on his own. He casually refers to the dragon as a frog in his mind, and even thinks that it's nowhere near as tough as the Goblin Emperor he faced before. His plan is simple: hold out until the girls arrive and provide backup. But things take a sudden turn. The dragon begins to charge up an energy blast, and Noor realizes that if he dodges, the kid will be caught in the explosion. So instead he dives in and attacks head-on. And that's when it happens. Black liquid oozes from Noor's body, and Enos immediately recognizes it, that this is the true horror of the dragon. Noor has been poisoned, he can feel it instantly, and his body won't move. The dragon he's fighting is no ordinary creature. It's the Black Death Dragon, a legendary beast known to destroy anything it touches. One breath of its venomous mist can be fatal. Lynn rushes to help, but Enos blocks her path. The dragon is preparing to release an even greater wave of poisonous gas. Lynn demands to be let through, but Enos refuses. Her orders are clear. Lynn's survival is her top priority. If she can at least hold back the dragon's next attack, then Lynn might have a chance to escape. Enos tells her that she is the kingdom's only hope for revival now, and still Lynn pushes back, not wanting to abandon Noor. That's when Enos explains the terrifying reality. Even one breath of this poisonous gas will kill instantly. Not even the legendary hero of healing could save someone infected by the Black Death. The dragon roars, releasing its deadly mist, and Enos quickly activates her divine shield, wrapping Lynn in a protective light and vowing to keep her alive no matter what. Lynn's purification magic isn't working, and even the birds in the sky begin to drop from the air, dead before they hit the ground. Enos apologizes silently to Noor. She had always wanted to protect anyone in danger, but her duty to the kingdom must come first. Just then, the ground shakes. A dragon claw slams down in front of them. The girls are stunned. Then they see him. Noor is still fighting. Against all odds, he's standing. Barely, he's in horrible shape, his body collapsing under the weight of the poison and injuries. Enos stares in disbelief, and maybe this is why Dan once whispered that he wished Noor was still around. She finally understands that Noor isn't foolish, and he's exactly the kind of person she's always looked up to. The kind who pushes past all fear to protect someone. The kind who becomes a true shield. But it's clear that Noor is at his limit. The next attack from the Black Death Dragon lands hard, sending him crashing into the ground with brutal force. Dust settles, blood drips from his ears, and yet Noor, lying battered and broken, smiles, and for some reason he looks relieved. He whispers to himself that he can still make this work. A look back reveals a group of imprisoned children. They were believed to be cursed because they were born with the power to control magical beasts, and people called them worthless brats, and they were barely given anything to eat. One particular child was taught that their power should only be used to control livestock. However, one of these demi-humans once used their ability to command monsters during a war, leading to massive casualties. From that point on, humans began to despise the demon folk and started hunting them down. The child in prison was relentlessly tormented, and any attempt to speak was met with even more abuse. He also had the ability to read minds, but that only made things worse once people found out. Despite all the cruelty he experienced, he never once thought about fighting back. Even though he hated everything that was done to him, hurting others was something he never wanted to do. One day, the man in charge of the prison approached the boy and ordered him to control some monsters. He told the child that demon folk could actually be useful to humans. If the kid followed his orders, he would never be beaten again. He'd be allowed to eat whatever he wanted, and the same would apply to the other children too. But if he refused, things would only get worse for everyone. The kid couldn't read the man's mind because he wore a special device on his head. Still, he chose to trust him, thinking he could finally end everyone's suffering. Sometime later, the boy headed to the capital with the intention of wiping out everyone, just as the man had ordered. But that was when Lin destroyed the barrier. Takate apologized to everyone because he had failed, and he prepared himself to die. He hadn't helped anyone in the end, but he felt at peace knowing he had never hurt anyone either. He accepted his fate and hoped that if he were to be reborn, he wouldn't be treated so badly in his next life. He wished he could be useful to someone and quietly said goodbye to the world. But that's when Noor saved him. The boy couldn't understand why someone was fighting for him. He grew worried for Noor when he saw him get struck by the dragon's poison. The boy was also afflicted by the poison, but Noor did something unexpected. The boy's bleeding suddenly stopped. Surprisingly, whatever Noor did also protected the boy from getting poisoned again. The battle grew more intense, just like we saw earlier, and Noor felt a strange sense of relief even after being defeated. Another flashback shows something else Noor had done. After returning from the training schools in the royal capital, Noor once made a soup using herbs he had gathered. But one of them turned out to be poisonous. He was in serious trouble. His healing ability was too weak and he could barely move. After a long and painful night, Noor eventually dragged himself to drink some water. A book on herbs helped him identify which one was toxic, and with that knowledge, he tried to get back to training his Parry ability. Unfortunately, his body was still dealing with the lingering effects of the poison, and to recover, Noor had to rely once again on his low heal ability. Just another day passed, he was surprised to find himself finally feeling better. Not long after, he encountered the same poisonous plant, but this time he knew exactly what it was. Unfortunately, Noor's luck took another bad turn when a highly venomous snake bit him, and surprisingly, the poison faded quickly. Curious, Noor decided to try something risky. He ate the snake, and to his shock, the poison barely had any effect on him. And the next day, he poisoned himself again with another snake. At this time, the symptoms spread slowly. And that's when he realized something important. His body was starting to build resistance to poison. He thought this strange resistance might lead to a new skill. Over time, he even developed a taste for toxic things. As he kept eating more of them, his body would sometimes shut down, but overall he managed to handle it. While he never gained a new ability, he discovered that he could now consume poisonous things. The only consequence was vomiting a small amount of blood. For Noor, that was a small price to pay. In fact, he had come to enjoy the taste. That's why, in the present, he looks at the giant poisonous frog and thinks it might be delicious. He wasn't able to neutralize the poison in time, which caused him to cough up a bit of blood. But to him, that's nothing serious. Years of experience told him he'd be fine. He was more focused on the fact that his low heal ability had protected the kid. Without hesitation, Noor jumps back into the fight. The boy watching from the side is in awe. He can't believe Noor is taking on such a terrifying monster all by himself. Even more surprising, Noor is starting to push the beast back. Everyone watches in fear as the creature takes in a deep breath. Noor immediately sees what's coming. The monster is preparing its all-or-nothing final attack. But Noor doesn't flinch. With perfect timing, he uses Parry and redirects the devastating blow straight into the sky. Everyone is stunned by what they've just witnessed, and the monster is finally defeated. Despite the strange timing and location, Noor isn't focused on any of that. All he can think about is how tasty this poisonous frog might be. He checks on the kid, who then reveals something unexpected, that he was the one who brought the monster. Noor is stunned, and the boy explains that he was planning to bring the frog into the city. But Noor completely misinterprets the situation. He assumes the frog was being delivered as food. To him, it makes perfect sense. Transporting the animal alive would keep it fresh. Hiding in the forest would prevent others from stealing such a valuable creature. Noor convinces himself that the boy must have raised the frog to sell it. He feels terrible for ruining what must have been the kid's prize delivery. He quickly apologizes and promises to pay the boy back, but the kid shakes his head. He says there's no need to repay anything. He explains that he brought the monster this far by controlling it. Noor is amazed. A child that small, commanding a creature that huge? He begins to wonder, are there others with the same ability? The boy says he's never heard anyone call it a skill before. That's when Noor learns the truth. The kid was born with this power. To Noor, it sounds like a gift from the heavens. The boy nervously admits that he's demon folk. All demon folk are born with this ability. Noor shrugs. If that's true, maybe the power isn't so rare after all. Still, he admits that if he had that ability, and all he'd think about is using it to help people. The kid is surprised. He can't believe Noor isn't afraid of him. He asks why Noor doesn't hate him like everyone else does, and Noor says he just doesn't understand why anyone would hate someone for having a useful power. He tells the boy to ignore what others say, because his ability is incredibly valuable. The kid is stunned. For the first time, someone thinks he can be useful. Noor even says he wishes he had that kind of power. Overwhelmed, the boy breaks down. For the first time in his life, he wonders, could someone like him really be needed? Noor thinks about how different this kid is. Unlike him, the boy was born with an ability, so he wonders how someone like that could feel so useless. The kid begins to cry, but Noor gently assures him that there are many people out there who could use his help. Just then, the girls arrive, and Lin frantically offers to treat Noor's wounds, but they're stunned when Noor calmly explains that he's already healed, and that he's pretty resistant to poison. Lin can't believe it, considering the poison from the monster was extremely dangerous. It was a miasma strong enough to ruin the soil it touched. Surviving a direct hit from it seems impossible. Lin realizes there's only one explanation. One of the heroes once told her about something called the sacred spirit. By training one's body like a saint, a person could learn a technique that purifies anything it touches and heals all wounds. But that hero only achieved this power after 40 years of unconventional training. Noor, however, is still so young. Noor asks Lin to focus on healing the boy's wounds instead. She immediately notices from his appearance that he's demon folk. Noor tells them that he plans to take the kid with them, but the girls hesitate. Demon folk are considered dangerous, and many countries even recommend eliminating them on sight. They warn Noor about the risks, but he says he still wants to repay the boy. After all, he destroyed his frog. Lim then points out that it wasn't just a frog, it was actually a black death dragon, and she's shocked to hear that the boy had planned to bring it into the city. The girls ask who made the boy do that, but he doesn't know anything about the man. Inu suddenly realizes something. The boy was a slave. Slavery is outlawed in the Clay's kingdom, but that isn't true for all nations. Lin asks the boy where he's from, but he explains that he was blindfolded on his way here. He doesn't even know the name of the city he came from. Noor tells the girls he wants to bring the boy to the nearest city. Lin then recalls how her father always warned her not to be misled by rumors, to trust what she sees with her own eyes. She realizes that she had only seen the kid as a member of a dangerous race, but now she sees him for who he really is, just a helpless boy with nowhere to go. Lin feels ashamed of her own assumptions, and the boy introduces himself as Rollo. Lin now wants to take the boy along with them too, but Enos is still hesitant. Demon folk aren't allowed to enter Mithra, and bringing him there could be dangerous. At the same time, if they leave Rollo behind, it will be just as difficult for him to survive. It's a tough decision. If Mithra sees them with a demon folk, the city might treat them as enemies. They could be attacked on sight. Just then, their difficult decision is interrupted when a mysterious man appears, and it's immediately clear that he's dangerous. He reveals that he was hired by the person who sent Rollo to make the delivery. Noor apologizes for ruining their plan, but the man doesn't care. He simply says he's there to take the kid. Apparently, Rollo is worth a lot of money. The stranger moves at blazing speed, and Noor barely manages to repel his first attack. The man explains that his client wants Rollo dead, and it would be easier to just eliminate him now and return with a body. As they fight, Noor says he doesn't understand what this guy's problem is, but the man coldly replies that Noor doesn't need to understand anything. Lin is shocked by the speed of the battle. She can't even follow their movements. Anu steps in and tells her to stay behind her. The stranger continues attacking with creative and unpredictable strikes, but Noor is able to parry each one. Still, the man remains calm. Without hesitation, he aims to chop off Noor's head. Noor narrowly parries the blow at the last second, but he is stunned, and the stranger was able to generate that much power with just a small blade. The stranger is surprised too, especially when his blade breaks apart, but he immediately pulls out another one and resumes the attack. Nor realizes he's in serious trouble. He's now relying purely on instinct just to avoid the strikes. Fighting while trying to protect Rollo is draining him fast, and he knows he won't be able to keep this up much longer. Lynn is frozen in fear, overwhelmed by the power pouring out from their battle, and she can't even move. Inu steps in front of her using her shield for protection, and suddenly, something clicks. She realizes who this man really is. His appearance, combined with that overwhelming strength, confirms it. This is none other than the former S-rank adventurer, Zadu. A flashback shows Inu's discovering documents from a cold case. The case was officially closed because the target was listed as eliminated, but it wasn't true. That target was Zadu. Zadu became an S-rank adventurer at a very young age, which made him a target for other S-ranks. Enus was shocked. Normally, S-rank targets aren't even human. Gilbert had once been excited to take on Zadu, but the heroes warned him not to try. They faked Zadu's elimination because, in truth, he was far too powerful to be stopped. They decided to close the case rather than send more people to die trying. Gilbert remained curious, so they explained further. As a child, Zadu mastered the ancient art of dwarven alchemy. By the age of 13, he had already earned the title of Dragon Slayer. Gilbert was stunned. That meant Zadu was an even greater prodigy than him. Zadu quickly rose to fame, admired by adventurers everywhere. But as time went on, he didn't always use his talents for good. Zadu had once eliminated several civilians for reasons no one could understand, but the guild didn't revoke his adventurer's license. He had contributed too much to be easily cast aside. He even defeated a disaster-level monster all by himself. The guild was divided on what to do with him, so they decided to delay the decision. Zadu would accept any job as long as it paid well. Morals meant nothing to him. That became painfully clear when he wiped out an entire country, including the royal family. It was as if Zadu had no concept of good or evil. Back in the present, Enos explains all of this to Lynn. Zadu had been challenged by many adventurers, but it only led to a growing pile of corpses. The bounty on his head became incredibly high, so to prevent more people from chasing after him, the guild officially announced that he was dead. Zadu and Nora paused their fight for a moment. Zadu is disappointed his entire collection of daggers has been destroyed. These blades were made from rare materials that aren't supposed to break so easily. Nor wonders if Zadu is expecting some kind of reimbursement. Zadu thinks Nor is weird, but not as weird as his sword. Deciding to play it safe, Zadu tosses his sword into the air, and Nor is shocked to see it split apart into several blades. This attack is famous. It can take hundreds of lives in the blink of an eye. It's a weapon Zadu transmuted himself, known as the Silver Cross. Zadu launches the swords in a massive assault. Nor barely manages to protect Rollo in time. He already knows he can't win this fight. Aeneas now fully realizes how serious the situation is. She knows that both Nor and Rollo will die if she doesn't step in, but her mission has always been to protect Lynn above all. Enos suddenly comes to a decision. She asks Lynn for permission to leave her side and join the battle. Nor is doing everything he can to fend off the flying swords, but one of the swarms is just too fast. Luckily, Enos arrives just in time. She reminds herself that her duty is to protect Lynn, and that means keeping Nor alive too. Using her powerful shields, Enos pushes Zadu back. But it's clear that neither of them can land a hit. Zadu and his swords are simply moving too fast. Enus quickly realizes that her role is defense. If they have any chance at winning, she'll have to shield Nor while he finishes the fight. Nor isn't sure if he can do it. Zadu's swarm of swords moves like a living creature. Then Nor gets an idea. He tells Enos to move one of her shields on his signal. He enhances his body with a physical buff, and once the shield shifts, Nor launches the fangs of the dragon he defeated straight at Zudu. The fangs are incredibly durable, and Enos is shocked to see that they managed to shatter Zudu's flying swords. Nor follows up with his stone throw attack, eliminating most of the blade. Zadu suddenly appears and goes for Enos, but Nor intercepts him. Zadu can't understand how Nor managed to stop his strike, and what's even more shocking is that Nor broke his dagger, a weapon made from adamite. Zadu tries again, but the result is the same. His weapons keep breaking. Resolutely, he stares at Nor, trying to figure him out. How was this guy able to see and counter his attacks? Nor simply says it's something he can do, but Zadu knows there's more to it. Finally, Zadu decides to call it a day. Recovering all of his shattered weapons would be a pain, and he doesn't want to waste more time. But before leaving, he mentions something else. There's going to be a huge celebration in the royal capital. That last part doesn't sound good at all to Enos. Unfortunately, Zadu doesn't have any more details about the extravagant event. He simply says that Nor is the strangest guy he's ever met, and then tells Rollo to consider himself really lucky. Zadu attempts one last sneak attack, but Nor stops him once again. With a smirk, Zaru points out that Noor is the reason he couldn't get his reward for retrieving Rollo. Then, he finally leaves. Everyone is left wondering what exactly is going to happen at the royal capital. Noor thinks they should head back, especially since they won't be able to bring Rollo to Mithra. Just then, Rollo begins to shake uncontrollably after hearing that they're all from the royal capital. He tells them they can't go back because something terrifying is headed there. Rollo says he heard that the biggest monster is on its way to the capital, and it's strong enough to destroy the entire city. Lynn realizes this is even more serious than she thought, and she immediately decides that they need to return. Noor agrees with her, but Enos refuses. However, Enos is shocked when Lynn reveals that she already knows what Rain ordered her to do. Lynn explains that if they abandon the capital now, they'll face the same fate as the demon folk. That's why they must return and warn everyone about the monster. Enos eventually gives in, but she tells Lynn not to leave her side for even a moment. Noor suggests that it might be better to split up, for Rollo's safety, but Rollo refuses. He's convinced that a demon folk is behind the monster's arrival, and even if he doesn't think he can do anything about it, he still wants to help. Lynn sees how serious Noor has suddenly become, and she assumes it's because of his big heart, but she's completely wrong. Noor is actually just thinking about how he regrets not getting a bite of that poisonous frog. As they travel back, Lynn thinks about how worried she is, but knowing that Noor is with her gives her comfort. After all, he fought a dragon, and even the legendary Zadu. With someone like him by her side, they should be fine. She silently decides it's her responsibility to take Noor to the royal capital so he can save everyone. To her, he's like a man who stepped straight out of an epic hero's tale. Back at the capital, Rain is informed that many citizens have been evacuated thanks to the efforts of the 6 heroes. They managed to fend off the enemy's ambush, but Rain is sure that another wave is coming. It's the perfect time for an attack since the capital's forces are scattered and worn out. Rain suspects the enemy is simply waiting for them to exhaust themselves before striking again. He wonders which direction the next attack will come from, and suddenly, he realizes it might not be from the ground at all. It could be from the sky. He's told there have been no sightings of flying beasts, but something strange catches his eye. He looks up and is horrified. Something massive is hiding above the clouds. Using his uncover ability, Rain breaks through its barrier. As the illusion shatters, Rain stares in shock. A nearby guard wonders if it's a black dragon, but Rain quickly corrects him, it's far too big. What they're looking at is their worst nightmare. It's a dragon of calamity. A look into the past shows Noor being taught by his father about how dangerous dragons truly are. He explained that a certain adventurer once made a name for himself by slaying these beasts, and the materials harvested from dragons were turned into high-quality weapons and powerful medicines, which brought great wealth to the land and made that adventurer into a hero, someone the people would come to know as the Dragon Slayer. Noor wanted to become a Dragon Slayer too, but his father told him just how difficult that dream really was. Some dragons are incredibly powerful, have lived for thousands of years, and are capable of crumbling the ground with a single step or destroying entire mountains with just a swing of their tail. In fact, their own nation had nearly been wiped out once by dragons that had gone wild. Even after hearing all this, Noor never let go of his dream. Back in the present, Noor and his group are making their way back to the capital, and when they arrive, Lynn is horrified to see what awaits them. The Dragon of Calamity, a massive, terrifying creature, looms over the city, striking fear into the hearts of everyone who lays eyes on it. Rain watches in disbelief, wondering if the Magic Empire truly understands the horror they've unleashed. That dragon has been asleep for the past 150 years. It should still be dormant, but Rain quickly becomes furious as he realizes the truth. The Empire must have awakened it. With just a flap of its wings, the dragon unleashes massive destruction, tearing through the city as Saren urgently orders a full evacuation. It's a terrible emergency, and he tells his troops to drag people away from their belongings if they're too stubborn to flee. One of the heroes senses something even worse. She detects that magic is being used to obstruct the evacuation routes, making it impossible for the 6 heroes to reunite. Meanwhile, the others are spread thin across the area, all fighting to protect the capital in their own way. Gilbert rushes to the king and urges him to evacuate, but the king refuses, instructing Gilbert to focus instead on getting the citizens to safety. He says that he still has something he must do, even if it costs him. Nearby, Enos begins to feel hopeless, convinced that there's nothing left they can do. The dragon will surely destroy everything. Lynn fears that her father will sacrifice himself to buy time for the evacuation, but she also knows deep down that even he won't stand a chance against such a legendary beast. She's terrified of what's to come and prays that her father chooses to escape rather than face it head-on. Just then, everyone is caught off guard by how calm Noor remains. He casually mentions that he's never seen a dragon before, but Lynn reminds him that the monster he fought earlier was technically a dragon too. She then explains that both her father and brother are still inside the capital, but it's far too late to reach them. Noor, still unfazed, says he thinks he can make it in time if he runs. This shocks Lin, and Nora suggests they could use her wind blast again like they did against the goblin before, but Lin warns him that the amount of power needed to launch him fast enough could seriously hurt him. Nora calmly replies that his sword will absorb most of the damage anyway. He says he owes the people of the city and the king far too much to just stand by, and that all he really needs to do is help the king escape, something he's confident he can accomplish. Lin suddenly snaps out of her pessimism as she realizes that Noor isn't someone to be doubted, even though her wind blast was never intended to be used on people, and in this moment she believes he just might be able to take it. Noor isn't an ordinary guy. A glimpse into the past shows the king once refusing to hand over the Dungeon of the Lost to the Magic Empire, even after being told he was wasting a power that could create an army capable of conquering the world. The king stood firm, saying he simply chose not to use something beyond anyone's control. Back in the present, the dragon continues its rampage as the king realizes the Empire won't stop until they claim the dungeon. He admits he underestimated them, never expecting they'd unleash their full might. As the capital faces destruction, all he can think about is Lin's safety. But that moment makes him realize the Empire might have been right. He's never truly been fit to rule, and he's always belonged on the battlefield. He apologizes to his people for failing them, but swears he'll at least take one of the dragon's eyes before he dies. Meanwhile, Anus forms a shield cylinder to amplify Lin's wind blast, with Noor standing in front to boost the force even more. Anus layers her shield with magic reflect over and over, and Noor senses this time is different from before. Lin confirms it, saying the impact now will be much stronger than the last. She gives it everything, apologizing to Noor just before launching the blast, but she remembers not to doubt him, and as she fires, Rollo watches in awe and Noor vanishes in an instant. At the capital, the king comes face to face with the dragon. Horror fills the air as it charges up its elder dragon breath, the same one that burned an entire continent centuries ago. The king knows he won't survive, but he still wants to do something worthy of a king before the end. He pulls out a dagger and tells the dragon he's going to show it what humans are made of. One of the heroes watching recognizes it, the blasting dagger, a weapon that focuses all of the wielder's mana into one powerful, sacrificial strike. Everyone watching realizes the king is about to give his life, and there's no other way. As the king charges, Noor suddenly appears and parries the dragon's attack, stunning everyone. A single human just pushed back the legendary beast, and the dragon herself is confused. She growls, declaring that the strong rule the weak with violence, because that's simply how the world works. Her massive tail swings, smashing parts of the capital, but Noor parries that too, and she crashes down again. Noor, still standing, thinks to himself that he really didn't expect to survive. Just before that moment, he had used physical enhancement midair to stabilize himself and launched straight over the castle wall. Even he didn't expect he'd arrive that fast. But he realized there was no way to stop himself, so Noor didn't hesitate. He used his parry ability and managed to land safely, though he tells himself he never wants to do that again. Parrying the dragon turned out to be way easier than he expected, and now that she's standing back up, he doesn't find her all that terrifying anymore. The girls finally arrive at the capital with a plan to help the king escape while Noor keeps the dragon busy, but they're suddenly attacked. Fortunately, Inus protects them just in time. Several goblin emperors appear, and although they're smaller than the one Norland faced, they're still incredibly dangerous in their own right. Lin decides to think like Noor and tells Inus not to worry. They're just fighting goblins after all. Inspired by her confidence, Inus agrees, saying these goblins are nothing compared to the dragon. But the goblins quickly break through her defense. Just as things get critical, Rollo steps forward and commands the goblins to stop, freezing them in place. Lin uses the moment to freeze them further, while Inus transforms her shield into a sword and wipes them out with a single powerful strike. Lin finally understands why she was given the Divine Sword title, and Rollo proves just as impressive. Stopping overpowering goblins with only his voice is no small feat, and though he's young, El can tell it takes real courage for him to use that kind of power. Back with Noor, the dragon is growing frustrated. She continues attacking, but Noor keeps parrying every strike. Her claws and scales should be indestructible, yet Noor's blows are damaging them badly. Noor is surprised his sword never takes even a scratch, no matter what it hits. And while he's curious about the secret behind it, all that matters now is that it's the key to his victory. The dragon doesn't understand what's happening either, but she's sure that this time her next attack won't fail. She takes to the sky and gathers a massive amount of energy into her mouth, then releases it straight toward Noor, who once again parries it, sending the blast high into the air. Everyone watches in awe as the explosion lights up the sky. The dragon roars in fury, but Rollo can sense there's more behind that scream. It's not just rage, it's frustration. Noor isn't treating her like a real threat, even though she's trying to be one. Dragons are prideful, and for a dragon elder who sees herself as the strongest being alive, this is unbearable. She lashes out again, but Noor parries the attack once more, and that's when something changes. The dragon suddenly submits. The girls watch in shock, and the townspeople from a distance can hardly believe their eyes. Nor recalls what his father once said about the adventurer who slayed dragons, how it brought wealth and honor, how it earned him the title of Dragon Slayer. But Nor now sees that this dragon doesn't want to fight anymore. He chooses not to end her life, admitting to himself that he probably isn't hero material anyway. His friends rush toward him as he waves at them, casually letting them know that he's okay. Nor thanks Rollo for helping, but Rollo has no idea what he's talking about, so Nor explains what he just realized. The reason the dragon calmed down must have been because Rollo ordered it to. Nor is shocked when Rollo says he actually didn't do anything, and confused, Nor points out that the dragon stopped being hostile completely on its own. Since Rollo had nothing to do with it, Nor assumes the dragon must have been intimidated just by the fact that Rollo could control it. Everyone is stunned when Nor tells Rollo to send the dragon back to where it came from. The others argue that it's still dangerous and that this might be their only chance to eliminate it, but Nor understands the risk and still refuses to hurt the beast. He admits it's selfish, but Lin understands where he's coming from and agrees to let it go. Rollo isn't confident that he can order such a powerful dragon around and thinks he might only be able to politely ask it. But Nor can tell that Rollo doesn't like showing off his power, so he assures him that Lin and Enos won't be afraid of him. These words give Rollo the push he needs, so he gives it a try. Rollo is able to understand the dragon and tells Nor that it has agreed to do whatever its master says. The girls are shocked, but Nor, still clueless, assumes the dragon is calling Rollo its master. Nor then tells Rollo to have it quietly return home and to make sure it never hurts a human ever again. Rollo passes the message, and to everyone's surprise, the dragon agrees. It leads the sky, lets out one last roar and begins to leave peacefully, but Nor is horrified when a powerful blast knocks it straight out of the sky. Everyone shares the same terror as they realize what just happened, and then we see the evil leader of the Empire, Darius, was behind the attack. Darius is pleased with himself, declaring that even a dragon that lived for thousands of years is still just a stupid beast in the end. The dragon was only a pawn, and while he's disappointed it didn't destroy the capital, he decides to begin the assault anyway and summons his army. Nearby, troops begin to appear, and their firepower is overwhelming. A look back reveals how the Empire carefully planned the attack. Once the dragon destroyed the capital, their forces were supposed to move in and finish the job. Foot soldiers were armed with magic swords and shields, elites equipped with magic armor and cannons, backed by enormous shields and giant mana cannons. The king of the empire was pleased with the plan, but one soldier, Randus, had doubt. He believed the war wouldn't benefit the country in the long run, but Darus silenced him quickly, refusing to let anyone challenge his rule. He swore that they would show the world the true power of their magic. Darus wants this war to be remembered in history, not just as an invasion but as a lesson, so people would know how foolish the Clay Kingdom was for neglecting the Dungeon of the Lost. A nation brought to ruin by its own selfishness. Darus sees himself as the one who will liberate the world from such ignorance. Nearby, Nor and the others spot the dragon's body, unsure if it's still alive. As they move closer, they spot the Empire's troops, and the Empire sees them too. They recognize Princess Lin, but what truly concerns them is that Ennis is standing beside her. Ennis is one of the living legends, known throughout the world, and Darus quickly assumes she must be the one who saved the capital. He declares that the age of legends is over, it's time for the wise to rule. He then orders the Mona Cannon to fire. Even though Ennis is known as the Divine Shield, Darus believes this weapon will erase her completely, reducing her to just another legend defeated by his hand. And that's why Darus loves war so much. The Mona Cannon prepares to fire, and the group notices it at the last second. Ainus quickly tells the others to run, and just as the weapon unleashes its massive beam, Darus declares that it's all over for her. But to everyone's shock, Nor steps up and parries the giant blast. The beam scatters in every direction, and no one can believe what they just witnessed. Darus and his troops are in disbelief. They assume something must have gone wrong with the cannon, so Darus orders them to prepare another shot. Nor, meanwhile, is amazed by the size of the Empire's army. The girls explain that they're planning to annihilate the entire Clay Kingdom. Although Clay has its own army, they don't stand a chance against the Empire's overwhelming numbers. Enus urges Lin to retreat with her, and Lin asks what Nor plans to do. Nor says it should be obvious, and internally, he's just thinking that he needs to run for his life and get as far away from here as possible. Lin agrees that it was a silly question, though from the look on her face, it's clear she believes he's about to do something heroic. Nor starts to wonder why she's smiling, unsure if she actually understood what he meant. He tries to clarify that he's really going to run, but before he can finish, another attack comes their way. Ennis blocks the next strike, and Darus, growing annoyed, decides to fall back to the rear of his army. As they all get pinned down by continuous fire, Nor concludes there's only one way to escape. He tells the others that he's going to distract the army, and they need to use that window to flee. Nor doesn't think he's great at fighting, but he's fully confident in his ability to run. A quick flashback shows how he honed this skill by running from swarms of bees, so his plan now is to just sprint around like a madman. Lin offers to help, and Nor is shocked when he realizes she means she's going to use her wind blast again. She promises to control it better this time, but Nor insists he's not throwing his life away. Still, there's no time to argue. Another attack is coming fast. Nor enhances himself, braces, and then gets launched across the battlefield. He's relieved to see that he's managing to deflect the Empire's attacks as he flies. There's no turning back now, so he charges straight toward the enemy forces. Using the Parry ability he spent years mastering, he disarms dozens of soldiers while weaving through the chaos. Nor isn't trying to win, he just wants to buy enough time for everyone else to escape. As he keeps running and parrying everything in sight, Darius is horrified to see his forces being toyed with. Nor appears right in front of him, and the weapons that had been parried earlier now begin falling from the sky like rain. Even the Empire's massive shields were deflected by Nor and are now crashing down on their own troops, and Darius can't even begin to understand the physics-defying technique that Nor is using. Nor continues his chaotic dash, and Darius starts to panic. He recognizes Nor. He's the same guy who was just casually standing beside Lin, but now he's somehow covering the entire battlefield with impossible speed. Darius can't figure out why Nor's ignoring everyone else just to focus on him, and he starts to fear that Nor might know he's the Emperor. When Nor suddenly grabs him, Darius freaks out but reassures himself that his armor and sword are made of rare, insanely strong material. He prepares to fight back, but Nor just flies right past him and Darius assumes he escaped. The next moment, he's slammed around by the Mona cannons, unable to process what's even happening. Nor continues flying wildly through the chaos, and Darius is finally hit with the truth. His massive army is being destroyed, and all the shields designed to withstand a dragon's breath are failing. Everything he relied on is worthless now. He yells, demanding to know who Nor really is, and then he sees something he recognizes. It's the Clay Kingdom's Black Blade, the relic that once stood behind the royal throne. Darius is horrified. It's the one dungeon artifact he's always wanted more than anything else. What shocks him even more is that the sword is made of an unknown metal, one supposedly too heavy for any normal human to wield. Even the freakishly strong King Clay needed both hands just to wield that sword, so there's no way some random guy like this could possibly surpass him. But Nor casually tosses the sword over his shoulder like it weighs nothing, and that's when Darius completely loses it. Terrified beyond reason, Darius stares at the man who single-handedly wiped out his entire army, and the only thought in his mind is that Nor is keeping him alive just to torment him. The fear becomes too much, and Darius wets himself. Without a second thought, he turns and runs, scrambling onto his horse and fleeing the battlefield as fast as he possibly can, desperate to get away from Nor. A look back to just moments ago shows what really happened from Nor's perspective. He had managed to stop himself mid-air after being launched, and while trying to regain his balance, he noticed an old man nearby. Even the man's horses were covered in golden armor, and the guy just stared at Nor in pure shock. But Nor didn't have much time to process who he was, because the soldiers' weapons, the same ones he'd parried earlier, were now falling back from the sky. If the soldiers were able to recover those weapons, they'd attack all at once, so Nor kept sending them back into the air. He did the same with the giant shields, and while maneuvering through the chaos, he bumped into the old man again. Nor kept parrying everything in his path, but he also had to keep reminding himself to take a breath or he'd collapse. When the old man drew his sword, Nor didn't even bother parrying. It was clear the guy wasn't a threat. He focused on clearing the army, but at the back of his mind, he couldn't help but worry that the old man might get hurt if he stayed on the field. The old man, on the other hand, was confused why Nor wasn't finishing him off, and Nor, too exhausted to explain, simply smiled, which unfortunately backfired because his awkward smile looked terrifying. The old man panicked and ran for his life. Right after that, Nor suddenly felt an intense pain. He realized he had reached his limit, and sadly his low heal ability couldn't fix this level of exhaustion. He coughed up blood as the enemies closed in on him, hoping that at least his friends had managed to escape. Just as Nor prepared himself for death, he was shocked to hear a familiar technique being used nearby. The surrounding soldiers were suddenly decimated, and although Nor couldn't remember the name clearly, he kept mispronouncing it until he finally recognized Gilbert. Gilbert was surprised too. He couldn't believe how much damage Nor had done all on his own. Nor was amazed when he saw another familiar face. Sig, the instructor he met a long time ago. Sig didn't recognize Nor at first, but thanked him for holding the line. Then Sig and Gilbert charged forward to clean up the rest of the enemy forces, and Nor was stunned by how strong his old teacher really was. This was the power of the swordsman he had always dreamed of becoming. Other heroes arrived as well, but they looked disappointed and asked Sig not to take too many lives. Still, they were clearly outnumbered, so it couldn't be helped. Two more instructors joined the fray. One, a powerful earth mage, began shifting the battlefield itself to take control, while the other, a white-haired man with a different approach, instructed his group to heal surviving enemies so they might turn over a new leaf. Nor realized that all these powerful fighters were his old instructors, and he couldn't believe he was able to see them again. Lin healed Nor's wounds, and he was now able to move again. Though he quickly realized how hungry he was, the battle had ended, and interrogation revealed that the enemy had no troops left. They'd thrown everything they had, even a dragon, and still lost. The Emperor himself had been so confident that he came to the battlefield only to flee in humiliation. Nor figured out they were talking about the same old man he encountered, and the wizard was shocked to hear that Nor had actually met the Emperor face to face. When Nor described the armor worn by both the man and his horses, the wizard concluded that it must have been made from auric kellam, a rare, high-grade material capable of enhancing a wide range of skills. That's likely how he managed to escape. If the Emperor made it to the border, then they wouldn't be able to pursue him, since there's a massive fortress and a ravine-spanning bridge that would protect his escape route. The wizard was frustrated, saying there was no way to catch up unless they could all fly. He was stunned when Nor suggested there might actually be a way, but it would depend on whether the creature he was thinking of is still alive. Nor's idea, it turns out, is to use the dragon. The wizard is stunned, never expecting he'd get to see an ancient legendary beast up close. Just witnessing it makes living to an old age feel worth it. San feels the same, especially since it's the first time he's ever had to heal something this massive. He gets to work right away, casting healing magic over the enormous dragon. As he does, he remembers Nor and is amazed at how much he's grown. The wizard didn't recognize Nor earlier, but San knew him right away. Nor is glad to see the wizard still alive and well, though the wizard takes offense, saying he fully plans to live for another 100 years. Nor chuckles, thinking the old man's funnier than ever, but the geezer is clearly not joking. The wizard voices concern about riding the dragon, saying it's a bad idea, but Nor explains that they'll be fine. They have Rollo. That reassures him for a moment, until Rollo admits he has no confidence in his ability at all. Just then, the dragon starts waking up, and the wizard begins to panic. Everyone tries to show their trust in Rollo, but Nor can already tell that the dragon is angry. Rollo is surprised Nor sensed it, so Nor explains that after living alone in the mountains for so long, you tend to learn a few things. The dragon wants revenge, and it's waiting for Rollo to give the order. The wizard is amazed at how much control Rollo has. The dragon won't move until it hears from him. Nor compliments Rollo as well, but Rollo starts to explain that the dragon is actually listening to Nor before getting cut off by the dragon's impatience. It wants to go now, so Nor tells everyone to get ready to ride. Nor is surprised when the girls insist on coming along too. They explain that Rollo needs to go so he can control the dragon, and someone has to be there to protect him. Nor didn't expect them to want him involved as well, especially since he's terrified of heights. But it was his idea, so he really doesn't have a choice. Sig joins the group, and so does Karu, Nor's old thief class instructor who will be in charge of keeping their presence hidden. Just then, the king and Rain arrive, announcing that Rain will be joining them. Lin is relieved to see her family safe, and Enos prepares herself to be punished for disobeying the king's order by returning to the capital instead of escaping with the princess. But Rain doesn't scold her. Instead, he takes the blame for issuing such a foolish command. The king leaves Rain in charge of command moving forward and personally apologizes to Nor for asking so much of him. He makes one final request, asking Nor to protect his children. Nor assures him that he'll bring them back safely. With that, Rollo gives the command and the dragon takes to the sky. As they fly off, the heroes watching from below wonder if it was right to let Nor leave without telling him the truth. Sig says it's better this way, because Nor never needed them to play a big role in his life. Thinking they could raise Nor themselves had just been their own ego talking. Nor was always like a hero from the legends, even back then. Sig realizes now that he's been lazy in recent years, choosing to stop fighting so he could teach others. But after seeing what Nor just did, he decides to start over from scratch. He's inspired by Nor's strength and refuses to let his sword stay idle. The other heroes are content too, grateful they were able to witness the unbelievable display Nor performed against the dragon. They start looking for the Emperor but find no trace of him. He's faster than they expected, and they begin to suspect he's already reached the Empire. Up ahead, they reach a massive steel bridge, the boundary of Imperial territory. Charging in blindly isn't an option, so they start discussing turning back. The decision falls to Rain, but before he can respond, Lin spots something moving at incredible speed. It's the Emperor, and he's almost at the capital's defenses. They're still hidden for now, but getting too close will trigger detection magic. Letting the Emperor escape isn't an option. The Empire has powerful tools, and if given time to recover, they could rebuild their entire army. Suddenly, Ina speaks up and asks for permission to annihilate the entire area. They're running out of time, and she's ready to destroy the enemy's defenses in one strike. Lin is stunned, because normally Enos would never suggest using her full power, but this time she's just as furious as the rest of them. The royal capital, the place she vowed to protect with her life, was trampled and disrespected. Rain gives her the permission she was looking for and tells her not to hold back. Enos unleashes everything. completely obliterating the wall and following up with a devastating attack on the enemy base. Their escape route is now wide open, but the mission isn't over yet. What they do next will decide the course of the entire war, so turning back isn't an option. They're going after the Emperor. Rain is determined to pursue him, even if it means entering the heart of the imperial capital, and Lynn declares that she's ready. Everyone in their group holds power far beyond the ordinary. They are the strongest warriors imaginable. But above all of them, standing at the peak, is her instructor, Nor. Lynn knows she can't even begin to grasp how powerful he truly is, and she admires him deeply. But while she's inspired, we see Nor in the background quietly suffering from how high up they are. He's clearly not enjoying the flight. Still, Lynn is fired up, and with confidence, she declares that they will show the Empire exactly what happens when they mess with the wrong people. The Emperor makes it back to the Empire, and everyone around him is left wondering what went wrong, but instead of explaining, he lashes out in frustration and blames his army for failing to properly use the advanced weaponry he provided. Just as panic begins to spread, when they realize the Dragon of Calamity is now headed straight for them. The king, thinking the beast had already been defeated, insists that reviving a legendary creature like that is impossible. But then it hits him. They have San on their side, the only man capable of healing magic on such an extraordinary level. Bringing the dragon back is impressive on its own, but the fact that it's actually following orders makes the king even more unsettled. They must have a demon folk with them. He urgently looks for his monster tamer named Lud, only to be told he's out of the country on business, and the king, spiraling into paranoia, assumes Lud has betrayed him. With panic rising, he turns to his general and demands a solution. Then, shocking everyone, he gives the command to activate their ultimate weapon, name Karanis, a powerful device still in the testing phase with no stable aim and energy output that's dangerously high. His aides immediately try to stop him, warning that it's too unstable to use inside the city and the results could be catastrophic, but the king refuses to listen and reminds them that the calamity is already flying straight toward them. He makes it clear that his decision is final. The weapon is powered up, draining all of the city's energy to activate, and this is the Empire's greatest technological marvel, and Darius gives the order to fire. As the weapon unleashes the most destructive blast in history, all eyes are on the sky. But in that same moment, Nor casually parries it. Everyone watches in disbelief as the beam, instead of tearing through its target, is knocked harmlessly off course. But they don't even have time to process what just happened before realizing something worse. And the weapon had been guided using trace mana, and that means the Empire's own mana furnaces had become the target. One by one, the king's aides abandon him as the realization sets in. They've destroyed their own empire. A moment earlier, right as the group arrived near the Empire, Nor had woken up and saw the shot being fired. Enos had been ready to defend against it, but before she could move, Nor jumped straight into the blast and deflected the entire thing, crashing through the sky and slamming directly into the Emperor's castle. Back inside, the king's general finally offers a plan to fix the mess they've created, but to Daro's horror, that plan is to eliminate him, and the Emperor, terrified and helpless, falls to his knees and begins begging for his life. Everyone despises the Emperor now, and they refuse to follow his orders any longer. Just as he's about to be executed by his own men, Nor suddenly comes crashing through. The general assumes Nor is trying to protect the Emperor, but the truth is, Nor doesn't even know what's going on. He still has no idea who the guy in the shiny armor actually is, so he decides to help him by slamming him safely into the ground. The soldiers assume Nor is some kind of bodyguard, and they ignore him when he tries to explain that it's all just a misunderstanding. They try to attack him anyway, but Nor parries their strike with ease. When they resort to using a bomb, he shields the feeble old man again and sends him flying into a wall. Only then does Nor realize the guy is actually their emperor, but he still doesn't understand why everyone's attacking him. Nor defends Darius again, though it clearly hurts the Emperor more than it helps, and the guards start to wonder if Nor is actually trying to finish him off. Nor makes a solid point, saying the Emperor's so old he's probably going to kick the bucket soon anyway, so maybe they should just let nature run its course. The general says they don't have that kind of time because the enemy is already attacking and they've brought the Dragon of Calamity with them. He wants to show they don't intend to fight, and the best way to prove that is to offer the Emperor's head. Just then, the others arrive and say it won't be necessary. They'd rather let the Emperor live and be forced to atone for everything he's done. And Rain steps forward and asks for permission to take care of things from here, and Nor agrees. Lynn takes Nor aside to heal his wounds, while Darius begs Rain to spare his life. Rain says he'll forgive him on one condition. He starts listing off all the innocent victims who died in the war Darius started, detailing the horrific things people endured during the destruction of the capital, and there are 127 confirmed casualties, though the actual number is likely much higher. Rain repeats that he will offer forgiveness, but only if Darius is willing to suffer just as much as every person he hurt. After that, they'll talk peace and rebuilding. No one objects, except the Emperor himself, who's horrified and asks what kind of suffering Rain means. Things get worse when San steps in and calmly explains the plan. He says they'll make sure Daru stays alive, no matter how many bones they break or how many times they crush his insides, because San will heal him every single time so he can keep attending negotiations. The others describe the punishment in even more detail, and Darus, overwhelmed with terror, wets himself again. They assure him they won't enjoy it, they just want him to experience the same pain he inflicted on the nation. Rain says that's a small price to pay for forgiveness and declares that their country is actually being quite merciful. Nearby, Nor is recovering, and as he surveys the damage from the beam he deflected, he feels guilty about the destruction. But Lin quickly reassures him. Only the mana furnaces were hit, and they're so volatile that people aren't even allowed near them. Rain returns to announce that the war is over, and both nations will now focus on rebuilding. Nor quietly points out that the war technically just started and says he wishes they could have talked things out from the beginning. Since the Emperor will be stepping down, his grandchild is expected to take the throne, but he's only 10 years old. Guardians will need to be appointed, and they'll be chosen from the group Nor fought earlier, the Circuit of 10. That same group now arrives to formally apologize to Nor for the misunderstanding, but Nor simply scolds them for ganging up on an elderly man. The general admits he's ashamed of what he did and thanks Nor for preventing a civil war from erupting in the Empire. Nor thanks him back, joking that he thought he was a goner after falling off the dragon's back, but luckily the ground was there to catch him. The general chuckles at Nor's comment, and they decide to leave things as they are. Still, the general promises to help Nor with anything he might need in the future. Nor still feels bad about the damage he caused to the city, but the general reassures him that there have been no reports of injuries. He also reminds Nor that it was their nation that broke the treaty, so this is simply the consequence of their actions. Nor offers to help however he can, but the general says he's already done more than enough and thinks Nor is just too kind-hearted. The dragon, growing bored, prompts the group to prepare for departure. The general finally introduces himself as Randus, and the group heads home. Nor, still terribly afraid of heights, asks Rollo if he could request the dragon to fly a bit closer to the ground this time. Lin suspects Nor is haunted by guilt over damaging a nation, but in reality he's just terrified of flying high. They arrive back home safely, and Rain informs the king about Nor's incredible contributions on the battlefield. He believes Nor deserves a reward, but Nor politely refuses, saying he doesn't need anything. The king insists, and Nor finally admits that there is something he would like. He wants help for Rollo. Nor explains that Rollo is a demon folk who has nowhere to live. He wants the king to allow Rollo to stay in the capital and live a normal life. Nor considered letting Rollo stay with him, but decided it would be better if Rollo were cared for by a wealthy family. The king had previously offered Nor a house and land, so Nor suggests that giving it to Rollo would be enough. Nor adds that Rollo saved his life multiple times and that the only reason the dragon listened to him was because of Rollo. Rollo tries to correct that statement, but Nor cuts him off, telling him to stop being so humble. The king considers the request. Granting a home to a demon folk could spark serious issues since they're still viewed as enemies of the kingdom, but Nor says that's all he wants, and any other rewards meant for him should go to the people suffering from the war. The king agrees completely, and Nor wonders why the king always laughs so much. Meanwhile, Rollo reflects on all the things he wished for before meeting Nor. He simply wanted to be useful to someone and to eat a delicious meal at least once. Nor wakes up from this dream, and Enos tells him that Rollo will be staying with her for now. Rollo is stunned to hear that all the food on the table is for him, and Enos insists he start eating. He's amazed by how soft and tasty the bread is, and he begins to cry. Overwhelmed, Rollo starts scarfing down the food like he's never eaten before, so Enos gently tells him to slow down. She promises that no one will take it away from him. Rollo smiles, possibly for the first time ever. Back at the kingdom, Nor is stunned by the extent of the destruction caused by the war. He is glad to see that the guild is still standing, and he stops to look at the signboard he hasn't seen in years. A memory comes rushing back. Nor remembered how shocked the guildmaster was when he returned after failing to learn even a single decent skill. What made it worse was that Nor spent 3 full months at every training school, yet still couldn't manage to learn even just one skill. That was the reason why Nor couldn't register as an adventurer. 15 years have passed since then, and Nor never imagined he would one day reunite with his old instructors from those days when he was just a kid. Back then, Nor begged Sig to train him to become a swordsman and showed him the permit he got from the guild. Sig warned him that the training would be grueling, but Nor was ready for it. His first days were extremely tough. Sig thought he'd be lucky to last 3 days, but surprisingly, Nor lasted 10 days without giving up, and Sig was impressed by his determination. One day, Nor got injured, but instead of quitting, he picked himself up and kept going. Sig scolded him for dropping his sword, yet he couldn't help but notice the fire in Nor's eyes. Even after getting knocked around so much, Nor never lost his will. Nor asked when he would finally learn a real skill. Sig didn't know what to say. Noor begged him to at least show him a skill he might be able to learn. So Sig demonstrated one. Noor was amazed. It was a technique so fast that he couldn't even see it properly. Sig explained that it was a move where even he himself could barely keep up with its speed, so it made sense that someone like Noor couldn't see it. But then Sig was stunned. Noor described every motion of the technique perfectly, down to the finest detail, and that's when Sig realized something. If Noor was trained properly, he might actually surpass even him one day. But after 2 whole months of training, Noor still couldn't learn any skill except one: Parry. Sig didn't understand it. If Noor could just learn even one more usable skill, he could advance as a swordsman. But no matter how hard he tried, Noor never did. He begged Sig to keep training him, but Sig eventually had to accept that Parry alone wouldn't be enough to make it as a swordsman. Still, he believed Noor had potential to become something else, so he recommended that Noor take a different path. Dan, another instructor, was surprised when Noor came to him next. Noor looked like a strong wind could knock him down. Dan explained that a warrior's job was to be a shield, to stand in front of others and take the damage for the team. But Noor didn't care. He was determined to become an adventurer no matter what. After 2 months of training, Dan gave Noor some credit because he didn't expect a kid to get that far. And one day, Dan had to rescue his trainees from a falling rock. But he was amazed to see that Noor was the only one brave enough to try and take it head on. Dan was so impressed that he believed if Noor could just learn a single skill, he could train him to become a literal invincible shield. Unfortunately, after 3 months of training, Noor was upset to hear that Dan wouldn't allow him to train any further. Noor had improved his physical ability slightly, but it still wouldn't be enough to survive the rest of the training. Dan acknowledged that Noor was a hard worker, so he felt Noor deserved to believe his effort would someday be rewarded. Noor then asked Mian to train him, but she wanted to test him first. She told him to try hitting a stick from far away. Mian assumed he would fail, so she could easily brush off his request, but to her surprise, Noor nailed the stick with a rock. She told him to do it again, and he did perfectly. With no more excuses, Mian agreed to train him. The problem was, she only allowed Noor to practice hitting targets with stones. She feared that Noor would end up causing trouble if he used a real weapon. But Noor really wanted to practice with a bow. Eventually, she gave in, only for Noor to instantly crush the bow with his bare hands. He kept breaking every bow, so she finally let him use her personal one, thinking it was strong enough. But of course, Noor broke it too, so she went back to making him throw stones. After 2 months of impressive training, Noor explained that he had learned how to throw stones by hunting weird-looking birds in the mountains. Mian was shocked she had heard about those birds, notorious for being so agile and fast that even seasoned hunters struggled to bring them down. Noor's accuracy was unbelievable, and Mian started wondering if there was even a point in continuing his training. After 3 months, she told Noor to leave, saying he lacked the finesse to handle delicate weaponry. In truth, she knew Noor was incredibly strong even without a bow. Noor then went to ask Caro to train him. But Caro had already heard about Noor from the other instructors, and he accepted him right away. Caro had his chain sneak up on a target, and he was very impressed with Noor's instincts. In the next training session, everyone was supposed to avoid traps to get to a treasure chest, but Noor had something else in mind. While the others carefully searched for traps, Noor just charged through them. He used Parry to avoid attacks and his rock throw to knock out snakes. Noor was incredible, but he completely missed the point of the exercise. After 3 months, Caro decided he couldn't continue training Noor. He lacked situational awareness and had no hope of becoming a proper spy. Of course, Caro was still impressed by Noor's stamina and determination. Like the other instructors, though, he didn't tell him. Caro was so impressed, in fact, that he decided he'd invite Noor to join the Capital Intelligence Agency, if he ever gave up trying to be an adventurer. Finally, Noor went to the wizard and explained that he had failed to complete any training in the other schools. 2 months into training with the wizard, they discovered the real problem. Noor couldn't use magic at all. There was no mana flowing through his body. The only hope to change that was for Noor to enter a mana-resonant room. Noor was eager to try it, but the old wizard was hesitant. He eventually gave in, but warned Noor to leave the room immediately if things started to feel intense. After a while, the wizard was shocked to find out that Noor hadn't left the room for a very long time. The room drastically amplifies all human senses, so Noor could have lost his life by staying in too long. But the old man was stunned to see that Noor was totally fine, and Noor even sent him away because he felt like he was close to a breakthrough. However, after a total of 3 months, Noor could only conjure up a small flame. The wizard still thought this was incredible, because it's extremely rare to see someone as incapable of magic as Noor was. But all things considered, Noor was still impressive for overcoming his limitations. The wizard thought that was the end of it, until he was stunned once again when Noor conjured another tiny flame, and This was called dual casting. The wizard was in disbelief because it took him 50 years to learn how to do that. Nor, however, was still upset. He knew this wouldn't help him become an adventurer, and the wizard agreed. The wizard was deeply disappointed. If Nor's body had just been more attuned to magic, he could have been known across the land as an unparalleled magician. Nor then tried his luck with San, but he had never undergone the rite of blessing as a baby. Only those who were chosen were allowed to train at San's school. Nor vowed not to leave until he was accepted, so San simply left him outside, and Nor stayed out in the cold for days, and San just ignored him. Eventually, Nor collapsed, but San was there to catch him. He decided to let Nor train with him, though he couldn't promise that Nor would learn a skill. After 3 months, Sam was shocked to learn that Nor had figured out how to use a spell called Low Heal. Unfortunately, Low Heal wasn't recognized as a valid skill to qualify as an adventurer, and this meant Nor had failed again. Still, San was amazed that Nor could use healing magic without a natural blessing. That shouldn't be possible, and it meant that technically Nor might be able to wield the power of miracles without limit. The next day, all the instructors were shocked to find out that Nor had gone missing. Mian thought they could just leave him on his own because of how strong he was, but San had other ideas. He believed that if all the instructors invested their time into nurturing Nor's gifts, he would undoubtedly become someone extraordinary. The others saw Nor's potential as well, and they all agreed to train him together. Zig wanted to search for Nor himself, but they decided to work together to find him. Back in the present, the guildmaster is glad to see that Nor returned to the capital instead of heading to Mithra. Nor had a long day, which explained why he was covered in dirt. The guildmaster explained that the construction guild boss had been looking for him. He needed Nor to help clear rubble and build temporary housing. That was exactly what Nor came to do, so he went to help with the cleanup. Everyone was glad to have him there, and Nor thought about how crazy his day had been. He was sent flying by Lin's spell multiple times, and did a lot of flying overall. Nor needed rest, but he decided he wouldn't stop until the entire area was cleaned up. At the castle, the king explained that the holy theocracy of Mithra had been working behind the scenes with Darius during the war. This was clear from how many mana stones Darius had in his arsenal. Things would be dangerous moving forward, but the king was confident because they had many strong heroes to protect the kingdom. More importantly, they had Nor on their side. Back with Nor, Lin arrived to greet him, and luckily for the starving Nor, she brought him some food and went off to distribute the rest to others. Nor was ready to keep working, but he couldn't help but feel a little bad. In his mind, this amazing sword of his wouldn't see much action. Still, Nor wanted to be an adventurer just like the heroes in the storybooks his father used to read to him. He got back to work but took a moment to casually save someone's life.